Okay, yeah, I'm just going to get a quick setting here. See if I'm going to go with the sliding the weights on me, and I don't want to look like it's bleaching out and getting all yeah, too much gain with the contrast and the brightness, yeah. But yeah, okay, so it alternates in between the automated sequencing there with the programming. But anyway, yeah, so like I just want to include some other stuff about I don't want to continually just seem to think, but it seemed to be something about the memory minus de facto being like 35 years, okay, and something about the black and blue thing, and there's been several locations during I call this Abraham Lincoln Night Vision Shuttercom StarGate program, and at first like going through it like 94, 95, 96, really more than 15, 16 years on a 10, okay. The thing with this is that there's a lot of factors that I've been talking about, on my YouTube.com channel at Wade ASV, Pretty PRDDY. And, at first, it's kind of like I really wasn't considering, much of it, we international, in the beginning, I'd seen, certain people that, that's, involved with entertainment. And, that was like not really anything new that I already knew about. But the thing is that going through, like a circuit, okay, certain things, and place that had actually been sites of like locations of like music videos, actually taken to them like yeah, during the period it seemed to be like a 6-month to a 9-month period, and it's like the thing about memory minus de facto, and I'm not real sure what the deal is about the entire thing about that, but it seems to be the thing about the memory during a pretty intense time, and it seemed to be like locations like all over the entire world, but something about the black and blue thing about certain factors, and I don't mean to sound like self-destructive by mentioning really anything about it, and I'm not real sure if that the memory, or just the if it needs to be like an academic thing about just the experience. Well, I do have something to say about it, but it's just that I don't know if I'd really call everything about it academic, other than determining some idea of how to I guess prioritize the experience as a going through a circuit and certain factors, and there's like a location of Brian Adams thought I died and gone to heaven, okay. It's like the black and blue. There's like several locations of music videos that have the black and blue thing about it, and I don't want to dwell upon the thought of like a military barrel deterrent, but the thing with this is that there's a categorization that's led to believe something about like the incoherence in like driver's education in high school. It's really based upon my experience, something far beyond what it's led to believe, and involving like a Department of Public Safety, or transportation in the way of like a alcohol barbiturates. The thing with this is that is the way it's taught in driver's education in high school, okay. But based upon some idea of like a incoherence, I wouldn't really call it a blind side, but it's like it's almost like a it really is and is not at the same time. Like I don't know if anyone has ever laughed so hard. It's like everything. I have laughed so hard, like 2 or 3 times, like in my entire life, that everything, got so bright. It was like unreal, phenomenally, bright. I'd laughed so hard, and it's kind of like I almost thought I was going to laugh all the way to heaven or something like that, and just like, it was like unreal. How everything, and I laughed so hard that everything really kind of like turned white. For real. And but in case it was like another different, and I wouldn't say comparison, but the thing with this is that something about the vagueness and incoherence is almost something similar. In color, if it has to be, and I don't really quite know how to explain something like that. But the thing with this is that I wouldn't necessarily call it a blind side of incoherence, but the memory is like it's unreal. Something about that. But the thing with this is that there were certain locations, okay, like even in Egypt and Europe, and I didn't even know it and remember like really anything about it until like this is like 1994, 95, and 96, okay. But there seemed to be like a 6-month to a 9-month period that it was like Virtually, I mean, I kind of like, at the time knew that quite a bit of it was like, taking place and not real, um, it's kind of like, it's almost like hard to account for in so many ways, but I don't know how to explain the memory being, a time, it seemed to be like, that it focused on, the memory minus the fact being like 35, or, 35 being, like Austin State Capitol, or, human capital, or the thing about the Fantasy Love 30. And it seemed to be, in combined with like a memory minus de facto being that with like the idea of like Vantage Love 30 being like secret de facto. But in case, so, there was like a location, it's kind of like a, different locations, even the being venue in like Geneva, Switzerland, it seemed to be the deal. And I would not have remembered anything had it been only for the rectangles during what, I simply and easily now, it was really after the fact when I really just like thoroughly just continually refer to the experiences like Abraham Lincoln Night Vision Shadow Government StarGate program. Realizing something, like an air raid taking place and realizing that all that happening while asleep and then incoherently quite a bit going on. And, realizing that years later, like when, okay, that was like in 1994, 95, and 96 were predominantly the three of the hardest, and even more the intense of a 6-month to a 9-month period during that time. The thing with this is that, really I'd say that about the first four and a half years was like really hard. But in any case, so like it seemed to be the thing about the memory, okay? And when I realized that memory had been such a big issue, is that like watching YouTube, okay? Because like from that time, I mean, there was like a lot going on in my mind with like, studying Alpha-American linguistics. And it seemed to be some idea like somewhere like Barbara Walters and Hugh Downs with 2020. Okay, and now it's like, the Barbara Walters with the View thing, and Alpha-American's 59. And, I'm 59 based upon my birth year, okay, 1964. And let me think real quick, 22, 27, 36. 59, yeah, the View thing. Okay, Barbara Walters has it. Okay, how about 59? Once again, it's like 140 in Pearland, Texas, and, all that movie about a 90-degree right angle, and 90 being like Brazoria, and think about, certain factors involving isometric, or the thought of like a memorial as compared to a monument, and what that is, and it seemed to be the thing about the carbon footprint, even sometimes of the absentee or the carbon footprint, even including like a military burial determinant, and how true it is about time zones. I'm not real sure what's all involved with it. I've even actually called and actually tried to find out, because it's not that I'm going to continue. It's kind of like, I'm not real sure about something, and I really don't even like referring to like military as soldiers. I mean, to me, it's almost like a degreed or non-degreed issue, or participation, or what the deal is about academic at an academic level that way. The thing with this is, it seems to be that I don't know if like if it's like a nationality thing, or just a time zone of a point of origin, or a base and a military. During a military burial determined, if it's like going, like it seemed to be like going around the entire world, okay, and then returning back home. I don't know if it's like a central time zone for the entire United States, or what the real deal is, or if it's limited to military, Air Force bases. It seemed to be the thing, whether or not if it's a combine between some idea of Chicago. It seemed to be almost like something about my mind's eye. I think about, about that, and from a distance, and seeing something as a mind's eye thing that referred to as some immediate thought of like Bette Midler, guys watching from a distance, and certain things about, some Boeing factors in any case. Yeah, so like the podium, but there'd been like other locations in Egypt, that location like even where Yanni had recorded a music video, and certain other factors in Egypt, and there's another band that's actually in Egypt as well. But there's like locations, and even certain locations that would be the black and blue things, kind of like almost the mind's eye thing about that. And I just want to mention it because it seemed to be like I'm not trying to be self-destruct over just having something to say about it. But the thing is, it seems to be the memory of the mind's eye, the black and blue thing. And, we international, and the participation of what, International Space Station, or, thought of like, things that are involved is kind of like, in any case, so like, I just want to say that real quick, because it seemed to be, the black and blue thing about a Chris Thomas song, Holy Forever, and other locations, and like a lot of bands. And it's kind of like when I was going through the circuit, I didn't realize how many musicians, I had no idea. From all around the entire English-speaking world. I had no idea how many people were involved. It's unreal. It's almost like almost hard to believe that when I realized that, I'd really put myself on YouTube.com for the first time. Really, seriously, with lighting is the thing, and really, 2020 is when I really, not that I planned it or calculated anything about Barbara Walters and Hugh Downs in 2020, or some idea that alphanumerics of 20 spelled out being TWENTY, being 107. Or military, or quantum, or diners club, but it's the kind of road that I'm on right now, kind of road 107, and think about the Mona Street, okay, and the thing is that it's kind of like a history of a rural route, a lane, a street, a county road, and it seemed to be the compound of a history of a mailbox, and almost like the history of a television screen. And the rural route, many people might not think of a, ERP or exclusionary rule provision, but, it's like going really on acronyms for a while through the Black's Law Dictionary. And, it's automatically, the White's Cafeteria and White ERP and all this stuff, and between John Wayne and, True Grit and all the rest of habeas corpus, and, all this stuff about, ultimately in my mind, it seemed to be ultimately get into Wells Fargo Stagecoach, and method of banking, and a whole bunch of American history involving, just some, brain work about, the Treasury and the U.S. dollar, and academics and investment terminology, and, aggregates, and what it seems to be, where it's really at in globalization, and national geographics and global positioning systems and all that information. But anyway, it seemed to be some of the memory of that was the black and blue thing. And yeah, so it's kind of like I don't know how to really refer to it any other way than it's just that I'm not sure that what it's really supposed to mean, other than the memory. But it seemed to be it seemed to be predominantly the thing about the entertainment, and something about the Bruce Hornsby. And there's a lot of locations, and it's kind of I'm not real sure about everything about it, but at some point mind's eye, before, during, and after. And, I don't know, referring to, a circuit as compared to a military bureau deterrent, there had been, some issues going, through it, and memory, it really has become, a big deal, okay? And I'm not trying to, self-destruct just because I have something to say about it. It's really what the deal is, but, I thought I'd mention something about that because of, see, here's the thing, okay? I'm a drummer, okay? And it's been really kind of, frustrating thing that the thought of an easement in a way of I'm in Pearland, Texas, okay, and realizing something about economics, okay, or I wouldn't necessarily call it a profile in a way other than I don't even like calling it demographics, okay, but the thing about economics that affect what availability means in a specific geographic area based upon a preference, or a mandatory requirement, or a necessity, or only what availability means to a personal preference, or if not, the standard itself, in a way. And it got to that point that come to the realization that, I'm realizing that, all that's working, and I'm getting a perception of the availability. It got almost as impressive as it did insulting, sometimes even making a decision on, making a purchase. It's really not, really not funny, about that, yeah, but, yeah, and when I realized something about that, it's really kind of yeah, so anyway, so, right now it seems to be an EPA thing, the acronym, Environmental Protection Agency, Electronic Power of America, and somewhere in my mind, it's kind of with alphanumerics and linguistics, kind of the Claritin Clear and the, Clarion, Yeah, and I'll get to that later. But it seemed to be, the thing about the thing about the air quality. And the thing with this is that really there's been a lot going on with air quality. It's like really making me um, not in a real cool mood about it. Okay, considering a lot that's been going on. Really, yeah, for like real. Okay, so the thing is that um, I just want to say something about the StarGate program because it seemed to be that the memory had become the issue of like that somewhere in my mind between like 2020, which is the big year in release of like the Apple iPhone SE, and SE being like 24, the alphanumerics of 19 and 5 being like 24, like RF like redundant frequency, or the Homeowners Association acronym HOA, and the GMAC of General Motors Acceptance Corporation, thing about promissory notes, and the IEEE, the International Electronic Engineering. Okay, and the acronym of 24, it also presents, the information, like a 2400, like the, SAT thing, the highest possible score, and entrance of a major university, okay? And the thing with it is that ultimately, it seems that really even the baptism, and I kind of like mention this, okay, because it almost got like ridiculous. So not cool realizing something about, Flag Day, or Six Flags, or what Six Flags really is in computation, because the alphanumerics and linguistics and analytical and symbolic stuff about, all alphanumerics and linguistics combined with like analytical and symbolic and, all that linguistic and alphanumeric combined with all that, it came to the realization that, the alphanumerics of like 6 became like, the presidential like number. But the thing with this is that, like, once again, okay, in my mind, it had presented, the identifying factors between, like, Los Angeles and Houston with the, the Los Angeles area code. And, ultimately, Galveston County and the Houston area and the southeast side being, like, the SE of Apple iPhone SE. And, in the Houston area, the southeast side is, like, Galveston County, the alphanumerics is 213, or Chevrolet Silverado, and the Z71 thing about Pearland, okay. The Apple iPhone SE is kind of like was the big release of like a 2020, okay? And Barbara Walters and Hugh Downs 2020 was like in the 80s, okay? And then years later, she had her thing about The View, okay? And, there's the movie about the astronauts, and I'm wanting to, I didn't watch all of it, and I'm not real sure if in combination with both cosmonauts or astronauts and cosmonauts, or, what the deal is, but it's the movie about astronauts and, all the right stuff, okay? And it seemed to be, some connectivity with the alphanumerics of 90 with a 90-degree right angle. Okay. And stuff being 59, and based upon, the alphanumerics of like birth year 1964, 64 being ACTP colon, and a double four slash for the ATTP ratio, and what the deal is about the misappropriation allocation of the Mississippi, and the ISS and SSI, and, and including, the PPI being some idea combined with like the HMO and the PPO. And, somewhere in between the Iowa caucus and the Eurodollar, and it seemed to be the thing about them. Yeah, and, it kind of like, it had ultimately gone to the thought of like, the redundant frequency, what medical power use, medical power of attorney used in a fiction real estate, as the deed restriction based upon, programming. And it's kind of like the Marcus Welby thing and the Quincy thing, because it seemed to be almost the International Electronic Engineering thing about like Quincy, the medical examiner, okay, yet Marcus Welby it presents itself as a doctor, like visited homes, okay? And the thing with it is that, okay, what access is to, the thought of like a recognizance, or, a professional witness, or, even the House Speaker, the Cabinet Speaker, or Congressional Act, the ayes and nays, or what the deal is about, the idea of like a, investigation, or whatever the case may be. The thing with this is that, knowing and not knowing and all these other things going on, whether or not if a map is being used as civil rights, and what alphanumerics combined with that, might only mean to television programming, or some idea of like a not necessarily demographics, but I mean just a specific location being chosen for like some idea of like a point of origin based upon a birth year. And the thing with this is that, I kind of see the alphanumerics of ACTP colon, the ACTP being like 64, the American, the Israel, the movie, the music minus A, And, even the thing about chosen certain factors of this alphanumeric is 64, okay? In any case, so like it seemed to be the thing right now is the iPhone SE in between the recent statute, like once again, and the IRA, okay, and all the stuff that I've been referring to on my channel, Wade ASV, pre-PRDY. But the thing with this is that, you'll see me on like a 35 piece. That's including the hardware, the cymbals, the special effects, percussion, the drums, the shells, the hardware, the seat, and all that, like with a hi-hat, tambourine and a chime, special effects, and all that stuff. Well, anyway, so like and I'm fixing to do a presentation here pretty soon, but I want to include the thing about Bryan Adams, because I want to include Bryan Adams because that was like one of the better concerts that I went to, and seeing him in the Summit, it was like one of the better ones, and he's like really awesome and live in concert. Back in the 80s was like like really cool Summit about concerts as a concert venue before it actually turned into the Compact Center. And Compact actually being the thing about the Commodore 64. Yeah, the home of the Houston Rockets, okay. And the thing with this is that all the stuff about information, even alphanumerics is 213, the rocket and the surface air missile, and the thing about just alphanumerics, okay. Not that just mentioning it's like a threat, a threat to national security just for talking about alphanumerics, but it's really not that at all. The thing with this is that it seemed to be like the issue like whether or not if international banking systems is referring to programming as thought of whether or not if a consumer point price index will only be the thought of whether knowing or not knowing if just watching television is the accusation of consuming information as a thought of memory, or what memory only means is intellectual, that normally it's used as some idea of like royalties and generating royalties based upon the memory that's actually retaining the information, content and conveyance being used, and the thought of that, like a compact disc or a motion picture on a compact disc or a DVD or, what was in a cassette, and even the live thing about, certain factors about, auditing in that way. But anyway, I wanted to include something about that because, I'm not real sure about the black and blue, but it seemed to be that ultimately, there's a deal about the black and blue and ultimately getting to the black in jurisprudence, and the black being something about somewhere in between, like my statutes of state statutes annotated referring to the black book and color code of like real estate, and the warehouse, and it's kind of like in between like real estate. It seemed to be the only issue between whether or not, and I'm not real sure how true it is about congressional acts or Senate or congressional acts that refer to the yays and nays, if it's the idea of whether or not if human capital is being used to define the meaning in combination with some idea like a commerce dictating what's on or offshore, or the thought of like a security issue as compared to a patent that's protected as compared to a patent pending would only be some idea of whether or not if the whole entire deal is about a vice president network of a carbon footprint and absentee voting and the way like only what boycott and embargo would only mean to some idea like what repudiation as a effect would only be some idea simulating some idea of like a writ habeas corpus producing the evidence based upon television programming or the experience of maybe constitutional law that's not some idea other than maybe being referred to as some idea of deposition. Normally people's perception of deposition isn't automatically the thought of like a intellectual property. Deposition is normally not necessarily always referred to as like some royalty generating factor, or though deposition is not always identified like on television as a tool, device, and mechanism. That's normally some thought of being inside of an attorney's office, or a tool, device, and mechanism that would only reflect maybe only the memory, or methods of maybe suggestion, of perception. In any case, so the thing with this seems to be that when a writ of habeas corpus is only the thought of maybe what television programming means, or the thought of producing the evidence as a writ of habeas corpus, only generating some thought of what repudiation and jurisprudence might only suggest as a method of, I mean, for real. I mean, if repudiation is the ultimate point of like writs of habeas corpus, I mean, where's the compliment at? I mean, making a grade on internet protocol of local area network of like maritime law seems to be, like really not cool sometimes. I mean, when realizing it seems to be that some instances is involved, me, it's just that like I've been through the circuit, okay, and years after the fact, realizing that really only because of the like a screensaver being presented by Microsoft on my laptop, presented, and it was really the first time when I realized that that memory was obviously, I mean, a phenomenally huge thing. That like when I was like on YouTube.com for like 2 years from 2020 to 2022, progressively some issues had like just started manufacturing what seemed to be some idea of like a writs of habeas corpus producing evidence as some idea of programming, or some issue between some idea of like memory minus the fact only being like in my mind being the 35 thing, which is obviously now the thing about AT&T taking over Southwestern Bell and not being truthfully anything other than AT&T, or some idea of maybe just what the rectangles. Okay, here's the thing about the rectangles. United States map 1992 was the one and only year that I seen a bunch of like red rectangles identified as restricted areas. Not every single one of them were identified as a restricted area. Pearland, where I'm at right now, is one of them, okay, in the Houston area. And the thing about the rectangle, okay, but that was like a that was like a somewhere in my mind. I'm thinking it's like somewhere pretty close to like I think 1992 or 93. I noticed that, and it's like the first and one and only time I noticed it. It might have been maybe 1990 or 91. I'm not sure. I'm trying to actually place it with my memory when I actually saw it, but it was the one and only time that I've seen it. And I didn't think of it in any kind of way like international financial management of international banking systems, presenting like Lincoln Continental hood ornament that would only be the factor as a horizontal red square, as like United States codes annotated as the separation between church and state, like a color code of like the horizontal landscaping like flat plane of a rectangle representing United States codes annotated in combination going through a StarGate program. And really that's the only thing that only because of the rectangles identifying like high-rise buildings and huge commercial buildings at certain locations, and that is the one and only time, I mean, of some like phenomenal like incoherence. It's almost like comparable. That's really not, but the point of like like a newborn child not even knowing what language they speak or going to speak, and don't even have a language and like thought process to even like really consciously identify it based upon the language and the memory of like knowing. That kind of incoherence is like really I mean, as a newborn child, I'm thinking that would be like normal, but going after the age of 28 to 29, 30, 31, from like 94 to 96, maybe 1997, but there was like a 6 to 9 month period of an air raid going through that. And how many times I'm not sure, but it's like it ultimately resulted in going through, being taken to places back and forth, and even in my own home, and not even know I was in my own home, okay? And a drum set that you see me on, believe me, I mean, as far as I know, it wasn't even available in the United States when I was brought back. I didn't even know I was in my own home. And I'm waking up in the middle of the night, the furniture had been changed. As a matter of fact, this tent wasn't here at the same immediate time. But what I'm in now is actually here, except it was lined with white. Okay, and all this stuff is going on, progressively, beginning like after 2 years on YouTube.com, and I'm presenting what I use as a drummer, as a standard on YouTube as a drummer that I chose was predominantly a lot of hard rock and progressive and Christian and some Christian contemporary, and what to do. But it's like really feeling pressure, and some of the stuff that you see like me on, it's like air quality issue, and like stuff going on. And feeling the pressure like coming around at different directions, presenting like, hey, I was going to, just hurry up and get as much on YouTube as possible. Me making a mistake on anything that you see on YouTube, I mean, really just isn't it. I mean, there's like other factors involved. Um, yeah, so like, I mean, everything that like you see on YouTube, me making a mistake, even for a split second fraction would only be maybe a difference in maybe, I guess, a preference and some idea of, just like, hey. But I'm thinking that, some people would normally do that as a compliment, as their own particular style. But, I know that's still, other people's music and other bands and singers and all that. But the thing is that, like, when I was, like, uploading it, okay, I wasn't using, like, the YouTube.com. I was just using, like, my mobile phone. And I started with, like, a digital video camcorder, but it became more work. And I was feeling like some kind of, like, idea of pressure, just hurry up and get as much on YouTube as soon as possible kind of thing. And, after a 2-year period, from 2020 to 2022, it ultimately started resulting in some idea, like, 911 calls going to the emergency room. And like a lot of, issues had taken place, and realizing that really, I'd known it, but there was other issues that presented. It's like, really, like everyone like on the planet's like watching right now, okay? It's kind of like, it's not really excusing anyone that's like, causation of like any of this or any, thing, reasoning about it, okay? The thing with this is that, in any case, okay, like I'm in a 10-mile home, okay? And there have been issues like with like, contaminants and like stuff on my music equipment, and some individuals that seem to be linked with like New York television programming, and in administrative places in Brazoria and in Pearland, and it would seem to be obviously even included like Mexico and like Latin Urban League all the way South America. Yeah, even it seemed to be like even the color codes, but really I'm not trying to get into all that right now. Okay, the thing is that I seem to be the book Secrets of the Temple, How the Federal Reserve Runs the Country, and it seemed to be like realizing something about okay because of a baptism, okay, and so for real about a baptism, and experiencing some idea that it led to after a baptism not many days hence, I'm sure it was within a 10-day from like the Flag Day Saturday morning SAT, okay, a baptism of the Mormon Church once again, okay, like a bird bat baptism, and hopefully years later, looking at the book Psychic Warrior, America's Foremost Psychic Spy, and the cover up of the CIA's top secret StarGate program. The cover up, like once again, the guy is underwater, okay, and the cover up, okay, and the top secret, ultimately it seemed to be, a bird bath baptism. The cover up is like, a bird bath, and the top secret is like, it's almost like an unidentified flying, like, bird bath, baptism, like as a UFO sighting annotation in a field office, leaving an impression, of some circles and some idea, like a color code of sand software on like some architecture and like a specific structure involving, what is a combine of like federal, state, and local authorities, federal, state, and local authorities, sometimes, some people might call it, like a .gov, oasis of love, and or some people might call it, a place with like a boycott embargo, where the question is clearance really the issue of protecting a patent or a patent pending as some carbon footprint in absentee voting as a method of banking, or some idea, like a North American Free Trade Act, and what's going on, with like Capital One, hey, what's in your wallet, and for real, okay. In any case, so like and now I'd mention and I don't mention it only because and in any kind of way I don't want to call it anything like post traumatic, but it was kind of like when memory became a thing. It was kind of like a little bit of that was going on for a while. Like 25-30 years had passed by, okay, from like the most intense time was like 1994, 95, and 96, and 97, okay, but there's like an error rate. Now how true or how long or how many times for a 6 to 9 month period, okay, is what the deal is. And it seemed to be like the real big deal thing about the memory mice factor being 35, or Austin Powers, Blue Bonnet, Parallel Eagle, or what human capital, or human capital as like investment terminology, that is indirectly associated with as a method of banking at the same time. it doesn't really present itself based upon anything that I've really looked at or like tried to even consider, investment terminology between like the recent statute or, the IRA of the Apple iPhone SE. The thing about the Apple iPhone SE, once again, is the SE is like, yes, YES in the alphanumeric 49, okay? Like Pro, okay? Or, the Lord, okay? And C like SE, Spanish is like, yes, and C in pronunciation with the SEE. It's like, the thing about the, 29. And ultimately, it gets to the thing about, Abraham Lincoln night vision. In that way, it seemed to be, the difference between in like a Texas Instruments calculator, and it seemed to be the one of calculus, that anything beyond, whether it's an error or beyond calculus, and EE would pop up. And just basically, just studying alphanumeric linguistics and the US $1 on the backside, and realizing something about the E and what would be like an on-site, field scope and range thing about a site, the haloed, side of the between the C and the PTIS, and a new compass, to the upper right of the eye on top of the pyramid on the backside of the US $1, okay? The thing with this is like, it's like in my mind like a halo thing, okay? And I've waited, I put a complete stop on it, because when the one vertical line seemed to be, it's haloed, okay, and it's like a E, a A, and O, and ultimately, the three minimum, basic, methods of computation resulting in the alphanumerics of 58, okay? And the thing with this is that ultimately it gets to the different by design E, but ultimately it seems to be like the haloed left side of that symbolic representation. And it also presents, the issue of like spirit of adoption, like a geographical thing of like alphanumerics and proper English numerical composition as compared to telepathic brainwaves in Galveston County and all that Shirley Silverado C71 stuff in Pearland. And, difference between Galveston County and Brazoria County being Brazoria country. And maybe different by, description, same in meaning, like a spirit of adoption, like a telepathic birth of telepathic brainwaves. And it's a biblical scripture, and alphanumerically, like geographically. My thing about, studying alphanumeric linguistics that way. In any case, so like, I want to include that because, just because of that, because the black and blue thing, it seemed to me, that was something that was used, that seemed to be the mind's eye thing of some military barrel determinant, or some idea about that. But the thing with this is that, I don't really know what to say about it, other than, there was like another deal about, the CSI Miami, and it seemed like, the thing about, Make America Great Again, and ultimately it got to like some information like back in 1992, and COVID ID 19 was the thing about, COVID ID 19 being the alphanumerics of 72, or 1972, and going all the way back, and it seemed to be the deal about certain information of that one specific year that seemed to be ultimately, like of television. CSI Miami seemed to be the thing about the difference between like Marcus Welby and Quincy and the medical examiner on the table thing, yeah. Like on-site location, like a CSI Miami about that, yeah. And the thing about Horatio's name is kind of like it seemed to be like the deal about the misappropriation allocation of the Mississippi between the HTTP colon, the colon being a ratio and double forward slash. And, what all that means was like, the delta force and power square, and the triangle squared being a 6-point star and the telepathic angel, or, the deal about, Eva LaRue. I'm actually trying to place her name in the television series, but it seemed to be something about, in between like Marcus Welby and Quincy, there's like a medical examiner deal about the thing about, like scene. Yeah, so like, but anyway, it seemed to be, there's been like a deal, like, I don't know what the deal is about. Someone that seemed to be like, I don't know if it's like what the deal is about. Someone seemed to be thinking that presenting issues, complications, it's like buying like quite a bit of musical equipment, synthesizer. I had 2 synthesizers. I was really like working on getting the Yamaha, Montage 8, the flagship Montage 8. I mean, automatically that was like my first one that I really wanted to get, but ultimately it got to, a Roland Juno like 88, and a Yamaha, 6, what is it? But anyway, a Yamaha, oh god. Anyway, it's like 61 keys, but it's like really good one. I'm actually trying to remember what it is. But I had it, okay? And like all these complications were coming up. It's like really making me frustrated because, you know, I had like electric guitar and somebody keeps walking in switching my freaking equipment, okay? Including my mixing board, you know, and all that technical crap, okay? I mean, it's not so like not cool, okay? I mean, I'm like looking right at the crap, okay? Okay, but anyway, so like that's not cool anyway. And it's not, okay? So like anyway, so like a lot been going on, okay? In any case, so like that's not cool, okay? So like so in any case, like that's not cool, okay? So like yeah, okay? So like that's not cool, okay? In any case, okay? So like anyway, so like I thought I'd mention that, okay? Because that's not like not cool, okay? In any case, like, you know, buying this equipment and, you know, some, you know, jerk walking in and like switching my equipment or taking it or whatever, you know, the idea is, okay? It's like a, you know, I'm trying to stay calm about that, you know, kind of crap, okay? So like in any case, okay, like I saw on YouTube, okay? And, you know, it seemed to be like some idea, okay? Whether or not if some idea of like some claim a breach of national security is like manufacture some idea like what, it's not a breach of copyright? Or what is there like favoritism, like, you know, like manufacturing some idea, like, you know, hey, it's like, is there like something going on I need to know about? And ultimately it seemed to be like whether or not if EA Sports and Combine would like YouTube's like presenting the issue of like, you know, auditing legal media as like some idea of, you know, predicted estimate option in the future as compared to, you know, manufacturing auditing as a predicted estimate option in the future. Are you kidding me? It's almost like EA Sports presenting, you know, like a position in Wells Fargo with, you know, clear access banking as an executive position, you know, for someone who doesn't even know that they're being placed of, you know, accessing, you know, like an executive position. And like, how did they get inside the bank and get an account identified as like clear access banking that's normally maybe a regional executive position? And, you know, it's kind of like, you know, you're trying to throw all your crap off on some idiot that don't know the difference is what it sounds like available information only means, and whether, you know, who knows anyway for them kind of crap, okay? Is what ultimately it seems to have been getting to somewhere between like Regions Bank and, you know, the prepaid now card as compared to like Wells Fargo, like clear access banking. And some idea like, you know, presenting, you know, like what was then like a blue public phone that ultimately led to, you know, like a governmental structure, you know, going through a sheriff's department. And really since like 1990, you know, Southwestern Bell is like really like a thing of the past. And like, you know, the thing with this, it seemed to be the only thing about it being now 35 years later from 1990 to 2025 is a bunch of, you know, like, you know, a bunch of white stuff combined with like, you know, color code, the, you know, Air Force One, the President of the United States, of like AT&T and the 1040 EZ form, and all the information is like being presented as like supplemental security income of non-taxable income, and all this stuff about memory minus de facto in a 35-year period from 1990, 90 being like Brazoria, okay? And it seemed to be all the stuff about, you know, some idea like an electronic benefits transfer that represents, you know, hey, don't forget the Alamo, you know, and some idea of like an electronic benefits transfer between EBT and like the Lone Star card presenting, you know, Sandy Sandy Monument is like a Star is Born, or some like representation of some, you know, telepathic, you know, telepathic stars like Airborne, and some idea that, you know, a Nucopus is symbolic representation between the seed and the PTIs representing some spirit of adoption, some telepathic easement in the sky, and, you know, some ideas like, you know, hey, Star is Born, you know, wow, like a new eternal treasury is being born. Wow. Managing factor is lack of an eternal treasure. Are you kidding me? Hey, wait a minute, man. It's like, and let me guess, it's like I'm worth it, right? Yeah, you know, I might as well be a superstar, okay? So like, yeah, I think I'm like working on that, okay? So yeah, why not? You know, like really, I mean, who doesn't want to be in the mood, right? So like anyway, okay. So like I'm on here, like on YouTube. I'm on mobile phone right now, recording, okay? Fixing to upload to YouTube.com, okay? The thing with this is that Cricket Wireless is presenting, you know, some issues, and, you know, all that stuff, okay? And, you know, the thing with this is seem to be whether or not a boycott embargo is only reflecting a duration that seemed to be somewhere in my mind, a bunch of rectangles at different locations that reflect some idea of the United States map presenting, you know, red rectangles in the horizontal from like left to right, like would be the wide area network or the wide world of sports thing about, you know, EA Sports on the map, okay, with red on it, presenting some idea in my mind of like the United States Code's annotated and a separation between church and state that way between, the federal 12 Federal Reserve banks and some idea of going beyond, any banking, involving, money, the categorization of money, where the degree in the name, becomes, the active thing about the current affair thing and all that stuff, but, and it seemed to me, right now, it's kind of like the supplemental security is presented, coming straight from Austin, and then paying attention to it, really realizing that I've been looking at it, and it's being identified as like, subtrace like seek subtrace 310. Okay, so all the stuff about Vantage Love 30, okay, or 30 being 100, or secret de facto. It's almost like Remember the Alamos have become, whether or not, if it's the history of Remember the Alamos, some idea of like a threat to national security over an electronic thing of like Wells Fargo being presented clear access banking, like some idea that somewhere between Mexico and like Pearland, Texas and San Antonio, that there's been electronic, some idea whether if it's a breach or not. It seems that Remember the Alamo is the difference between whether or not if Centerpoint Energy has been being used as a carbon footprint and absentee voting as region zero, and like the front lines of the beach run, international financial management, presenting, the idea whether or not if SAN Software's storage area network or a news anchor trying to find out, what it means to be wherever they're at. Or, if citizenships and birthrights up for, for grabs over, some idea of like a North American Free Trade Act as a vice president network presenting, some idea of a carbon footprint and absentee voting. But somewhere in my mind is like that, Remember the Alamo thing about the electronic benefits, transfer between SNAP food benefits and like the Lone Star card, which is, similar to a student loan of like the deal about a presidential debate between the name itself, Ulysses S. Grant, of a student loan combined with a Pell Grant, yet, the deal about SNAP food benefits and the Lone Star card and electronic benefits transfer has the similarities of like Wells Fargo presenting, clear access banking, and Regions Bank, prepaid now card presenting insights and, Quicken Books. I mean, for real, okay? And it's almost like, Robert E. Rubin presenting, himself as, the United States Secretary of Treasury, and all that information going on that I was like looking at in the Secret Temple, how the Federal Reserve runs the country during the Ronald Reagan administration, identifying Paul Volcker, okay, is the name, and how true it is, I mean, I am so not for sure if that's the name, although the initials are PV, like a PA speaker, like Marcus Welby, like in Quincy and some medical power of attorney using fiction and real estate. I mean, whether if it's the idea of a mechanics lane or television programming or a stationary engineer, it's like General Motors, Acceptance Corporation in the form of promissory notes, or some idea of transcript based upon, teleprompting, just because, I have something to say and that's what I'm saying now. My name is Wade, okay? Okay, and do I need to, start referring to myself as Aryan Skyline of Latin? Just because the alphanumerics are like 213 going through the circuit and, studying all that stuff beyond telekinetic roll of the pen being some idea of like, not necessarily the grade, or some idea of like the telekinetic roll of the pen would only be like maybe the raising the Pinocchio bar, some idea like the Pinocchio bar, and Pinocchio's on deck with the highest on deck ERA and the pitch, and it's another line drive, and yay, all right, another fielder's choice, and why not? Yeah, okay, so like, okay, so all that stuff about telekinetic roll of the pen is ultimately, in my mind, going beyond the thought of like the Corvette or the veterinarian or the vet, and some idea of like Aryan and veterinarian, Aryan, and like Orion Performance Monitoring, AOL, America Online, and the AO of like Orion being the Arian and Aryan, think about performance monitoring. And it seemed to me, I mean, for years I looked for, like the name that would be amphibious and like, think about, beyond maritime law, yet, ecclesiastical in the way of like, some like spiritually gifted, deal about, that can be found like in the book of Ecclesiastes of like corporate terminology and corporate law. Yet amphibious like above, the flat plane surface, beyond hydroplaning, surfing the internet, and beyond maritime law, whether it's beyond the front lines of the beach run, only because of the internet protocol of a local area network, and, getting a little bit of the American Idol and amphibious beyond, maritime law, and getting all, aviation and FCC about, some aeronautics that way. And so, like, Aryan Skies of that, after about, maybe a year and a half, 2 years of, like, going through all kinds of names, resulting, in my name, Alphameric's 213, Wade Sterling Pretty, being Priddy. And it was, like, automatic for me to look for, virtually any and every name. And maybe I would think that would be maybe something other than my name, like Wade, being, something like naval or hydroplane and surfing the internet. And I'm kind of like, hey, man, it's like my name representing some, like, surfing the internet and internet protocol and the front lines of the beach run and, all that sterling silver, like, a bunch of, direct circuits and circuit boards and, and then, the Statue of Liberty and the phenomenally most beautiful woman on the entire planet and Venus, as well, And, it's like, well, good, well, great, okay, like, okay, yeah, all right, yeah. So, like, where's it at, okay? So, like, in any case, okay, so it seemed to be like getting amphibious and realizing something about, maritime law and aviation and the thing about, local area networks and internet protocol and realizing something about, all that information between, what's on or above or below par or on or above or below, sea level became the issue of like a dimensional clause of Washington, D.C. And, television being an alphabetics of 130 and D.C. being a thing about, in my mind, a direct circuit or a degreed circuit. I don't necessarily want or need or, have a need to, identify, acknowledging it maybe District of Columbia. It's just that it presents an issue of the equator is what it does, okay? I'm in Pearland, Texas, okay? And thinking that the North American Free Trade Act has only been, whether or not the Bureau of Vital Statistics is like, presenting, a carbon footprint or absentee voting as optional, is that like a, the thing about, District of Columbia being the equator and the book Secrets of the Temple Hypothesis over in this country and the history of the U.S. dollar in Latin terminology, or the deal about San Antonio and Laughlin Air Force Base as compared to LULAC, Latin Urban League, and the AC, in any case. So, I mean, all this stuff about San Antonio, remember the Alamos, and it seems to be now, whether or not if Wells Fargo presenting clear access banking is identifying some thought, whether or not if clear access banking and Wells Fargo is presenting, remember the Alamo and the supplemental security being identified as 310 and the area code of like San Antonio being like 210, or what the 100 club means to the code blue of Southwestern Bell and the United States Supreme Court Southwest Court Reporter. And the duration, from 1990 to this 35 years later in the year 2025. And, the thing about, AT&T taking over and Southwestern Bell becoming a thing of the past and all the blue public phones around the entire Houston area, I think if not the entire, continent, in the United States, that all the blue public phones were being removed. And the only other place that they could be found was like inside, going through like the thought of a sheriff's department or governmental structure. Some idea like where the oldest governmental computer mainframe called the Whopper is. The thing of it is that, some people's mind don't automatically, present some idea like a partition involving the kernel as a central processing unit. Or Abraham Lincoln Night Vision Shadow Government StarGate program, or the partition of a kernel presenting, architecture platform embedding and encryption as Abraham Lincoln Night Vision Shadow Government StarGate program. Or the difference between, like the kernel and like Ajax presenting, programming in language as Ajax, like it's almost like a black and white issue that somewhere in my mind it seemed to be the Lexus LFSA and Mercedes presenting the Smart for Two smart car. And hopefully, a 2015 Geneva, Switzerland summit meeting of like that one particular car, because when Mercedes presented, the Smart for Two smart car, in combination likewise, and in addition, I was looking at the Scion IQ and the Saturn Sky, which seems to be the big deal. The thing about, Chevrolet, Geo Prism and Hyundai Excel being like the two biggest, and the biggest shipment in the Port of Houston, okay, other than it being that fact about it, and somewhere in my mind between, the thing about, Hyundai Excel being Excel above the rest, okay, And it seemed to be the thing about the rainbow now, about all that terminology, what people to refer to, excel above the rest before, like any connectivity of the biggest shipment in the port of Houston being, the Chevrolet Geo Prism and the Hyundai Excel. The thing about the Hyundai Excel above the rest seems to be that rainbow with the James Null unit in Fort Stockton, Texas on a Saturday morning. And I'm thinking it's like pretty close to the same time of the baptism. How many years later? I'm actually trying to remember how many years from June 14th, 1992 on a Saturday morning, probably somewhere between like 10 a.m. to maybe 11 a.m. Maybe 9 a.m. from just maybe 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. on a Saturday morning. And that was predominantly when I was looking out the window. Someone said, "Hey man, check that! Look at that rainbow." And I think it was probably about the same time on a Saturday morning. How many years? I haven't even really got accurate about my memory about that one thing, other than just knowing it was like a Saturday morning, about the same time of baptism on a Saturday morning, approximately somewhere close to the same time. And some thought of like Chevy Chase in that one movie, The Best Defense, and that laser coming out of the sky about the poolside. Not necessarily, my thought of like a Safari, like a browser presenting it as like some idea of a server, presenting itself with its own cookies and ultimately, an operating system, thoroughly, not cool experience, yeah. But anyway, yeah. So like, anyway, God, it's already going on close to an hour now. It's like 56 minutes and like 20 seconds. I'm gonna kind of like clear that up, but I want to include, the thing about the black and blue thing about that one music video like Bryan Adams, and I thought I died and went to heaven. It's kind of like the scene to be. There've been locations that like I know it's like on a gurney. I was on like what I call the James Madison $5,000, like James Madison dolly, okay, and it seemed to be, the thing about, the dolly, the gurney, and actually getting there, and like, how did I get there? It's kind of like in some of these locations I'm at, I'm like, I'm not even knowing how I got there, and realizing years later, just because I'm watching, YouTube and like the news, and it's the rectangles. I mean, it's only the rectangles that thoroughly, in my mind had the connectivity. Once again, the coupon in my mailbox, LASIK laser corrective eye surgery, and ultimately the prefix of the White House, the way it happened with it, Mercedes-Benz on like FM 518, being in front of me, behind me, beside me, oncoming traffic, and all that, and even talked about it, and I just didn't realize the connectivity over a 15-year period, and in combination, television programming. Ultimately, it seemed to be, going through the StarGate program of the Special Victims Unit, the SVU, as compared to the SUVs coming through Pearland, new and used. I mean, virtually every SUV had, the Z71 on it. I mean, manufacturers that normally didn't even have it. I mean, every SUV for like a while, I mean, had, the Z71 thing about it. And I mean, it was so like unreal noticeable. It was like unreal. And, the thing about, New York television programming had become an issue. It seemed to be reflecting on some idea, like someone like causing me a problem, just making, getting my instruments and equipment for like a recording studio, because I was like really getting some like really serious, equipment for, like everything, including my drums and like the lighting. And what you're seeing right now is just like one handheld laser with like all those different patterns, and it has automation and sound activation, and the free still frame, and I mean, what you're seeing right now is just one with all that like right there on me and behind me, and I'm inside the tent inside my home in the cathedral part where my drums normally are, and what you're seeing right there is to like over my shoulders like a like a karaoke speaker with like the special effects lighting on. It's like really cool. It's like a pile, Bluetooth loudspeaker. Yeah. So like anyway, so like I want to include that because it seemed to be, important. Yeah, so like, I just want to mention that because, the memory is kind of like, I'm not going to sit here and, act like I wasn't like post-traumatic, but it's like I've been hearing all kinds of crap like all around me about something that seemed to be, like really, I mean, far beyond like not cool. Okay, and I'm not even referring to, other things about on YouTube involving locations of music videos or motion picture like overseas during a very, intense time. Seemingly, of an air raid that had resulted in how many times, I'm not sure, of a 6 month to a 9 month period. But I mean, obviously, like, even some of that's like on there. I really don't know what to think about it, but the thing it is that, I mean, actually realizing it was like the Europe's most wealthiest museums when I really realized. And that was like, God, way back in, I'm not sure if my father had already passed away yet or not. In May of 2018. But somewhere around 2018 is when I noticed that sequence, that I noticed that over a period of 5 or 6 years, I'd seen Microsoft presenting, a multiple assortment of screensavers, and I realized I'd seen the same ones time after time, and I think it was, a 5 to 6 year period, maybe once a year, or maybe a two, maybe 1 month, maybe 6 weeks period. And then I realized that for the first time, when I realized that I was taken there during that time, it almost seemed to be the thing about a funeral home for, like, people being, like, preserved and, like, in the museum, like, not buried in like a statue, like people like being preserved, like, for a museum. And I didn't see that much about it, but it seemed to be almost like I mentioned, it almost seemed to be, I mean, if that location is like something like Demi Moore and like Patrick Swayze and the Hall of Souls, I mean, I'm almost like, you gotta be kidding me, something like that, as something about that. And I'm thinking somewhere in my mind, it's almost like it would have to be the one location about some idea of the Hall of Souls, I mean, for real. And that one thing about, the Seven Seal and the Seven, it's the movie Seven Sign with Demi Moore and Patrick Swayze, okay? And during the movie, okay, it's talking about the Seven Seal, okay? It's like a Van Halen song, likewise. It's like a really good one that I do as well. But the thing of it is that it seemed to be like something about that Europe's most wealthiest museum had become, like something about, I mean, would that have been something as some kind of experience that would represent some idea like the Hall of Souls in that movie. I mean, something like that. It's kind of like, is that really what the deal is about, Babylon 71 in Pearland? Yeah, so, like, anyway, I was kind of like thinking about that. But anyway, yeah, it's already gone like an hour and 1 minute, 2 minutes now. I'm going to really shut it down. It's already getting late. I was really wanting to stay focused on predominantly, the thing about the black and blue thing of certain music videos and something about the mind's eye. But anyway, yeah, so, like, there it is. And, yeah, anyway, have a good rest of your day and night. Yeah, there it is, okay?